Daniel Negreanu doesn't hate many people, but when it comes to Annie Duke, this wasn't a rivalry, this was personal. The trash talk wasn't for the cameras, the insults weren't jokes, and the grudges, they lasted decades. From leaked emails to blog post wars, Negreanu made it clear he wanted her reputation destroyed. So how did it all start? Let's go back, before the blogs and UltimateBet, before the C-word scandal, to a time when, believe it or not, Daniel respected Annie Duke. Before Daniel Negreanu became Kid Poker, and long before Annie Duke was a controversial figure, there was mutual respect. In the late 1990s, the poker world was far smaller, and reputations were built through word of mouth and online forums. Daniel was active on the RGP newsgroup, a place where the top minds in poker debated strategies and shared opinions. In 1999, Daniel posted a list ranking the 10 best limit hold'em players in the world, and surprisingly, he included Annie Duke, placing her at number 6 and praising her skills. This wasn't a throwaway compliment. Daniel had earned his stripes grinding the brutal 50-100 limit games at the Bellagio, widely considered some of the toughest in the world. To give Annie that level of credit meant something. He had played against her, studied her style, and believed she deserved recognition. At that time, their relationship was cordial. Annie was respected for her intelligence and composure, and Daniel was the young rising star unafraid to speak his mind. The poker world had no idea what would follow, but behind the scenes, Daniel already felt a growing tension. He later recounted how their first meeting at the Four Queens Casino left a bad taste in his mouth. He was a 22-year-old upstart, and Annie, already more established, mocked him for carrying around a styrofoam cup. She called him "cup boy" in front of others, a moment Daniel never forgot. He claimed she looked down on him, treating him like an annoying kid rather than a peer. This moment became a scar. Over time, Daniel saw Annie not just as a competitor, but as someone who represented a type of arrogance and elitism in poker that he despised. The respect from that 1999 post would never be repeated. Their relationship would go from indifferent to toxic, and soon the poker world would be watching it unfold. The first public fracture in the Negreanu-Duke relationship exploded in September of 2002. Daniel posted on the RGP forum describing an unpleasant encounter with a female player at the Bellagio. He didn't name her directly, but his description was unmistakable. The player was condescending, rude, and had tried to bully him at the table. Poker fans didn't have to guess for long. Howard Lederer, Annie Duke's brother, confirmed that the unnamed villain in Daniel's story was indeed Annie. Howard didn't stop there. He penned an open letter to Daniel, accusing him of launching a personal smear campaign against his sister. He wrote that he once admired Daniel for his charisma and potential, but that Daniel had become obsessed with fame and validation. According to Howard, this obsession turned Daniel into a mean-spirited figure, attacking others for the sake of public attention. The letter marked a clear line in the sand. Howard would no longer engage with Daniel except at the poker table. Daniel's response was immediate and vicious. In a lengthy RGP post, he tore into Annie Duke with rage. He called her a venomous presence who had haunted him since their very first interaction at Four Queens. He brought up the cup boy moment again, claiming it was just the start of her pattern of belittling behavior. Daniel insisted his criticism wasn't about poker strategy, but about ethics and personal conduct. He framed himself as someone calling out bad behavior that others were too afraid to challenge. He didn't stop with Annie. He accused Howard of hypocrisy, pointing out that while Howard condemned Daniel's public criticism of Annie, he had no issue privately mocking other players like Phil Hellmuth. Daniel made it clear he would not stay silent just to preserve relationships. If speaking his mind meant losing allies, so be it. The battle lines were drawn, and this was no longer just a disagreement, it was war. The drama escalated when Daniel and Annie clashed on the online stage. While both were big names by the early 2000s, things boiled over on PokerStars. Annie Duke filed a complaint against Daniel, citing inappropriate and derogatory chat messages he had made on the platform. As a result, Daniel had his chat privileges revoked, but rather than let it go, Daniel fired back, this time through email. In a strongly worded message sent directly to Annie, Daniel accused her of playing the victim and trying to silence anyone who dared criticize her. He told her to stop complaining and made it clear he wouldn't be censored. That email, which might have remained private, quickly found its way online, thanks once again to Howard Lederer. The leak only intensified the feud and pulled more attention to their toxic relationship. But Daniel wasn't done. He followed up the leaked email with one of his most brutal moves yet, a detailed post listing 7 examples of what he described as unethical behavior by Annie Duke. The accusations ranged from angle shooting to poor hygiene and general disregard for poker etiquette. Each story was laid out with specific details: a one-table satellite where Annie peeked at folded cards, her inconsistent demands regarding seat assignments in poker rooms, and an incident where she reversed her decision on splitting a pot after realizing it wasn't in her favor. These weren't small complaints. They were calculated strikes designed to damage Annie's credibility. Daniel wanted people to see her the way he did, not just as a difficult player, but as someone who bent rules and manipulated situations to her advantage. For Annie, these accusations weren't just personal, they were reputational. And for Daniel, this was about more than poker. It was about exposing someone he believed had gotten away with too much for too long. By 2010, the poker feud found new fuel in an unexpected place: the World Series of Poker Ladies event. Annie Duke had long been critical of the event, arguing that separating men and women in poker made no sense in a game where physical strength played no role. Daniel, ever the contrarian when it came to Annie, publicly supported the event and used it as a fresh reason to go after her. Daniel wrote a blog post praising the event's popularity and its importance for bringing more women into the game. He celebrated the 1,000+ entries and pointed out how his assistant, Patty, loved competing in it. But under the surface, his support was also an attack. He criticized people like Annie and Sean Deeb who protested the event's existence, calling their logic flawed and their motivations questionable. Annie responded in kind with a blog post titled "The Ladies Event Redux," where she broke down why she believed the event did more harm than good. She explained that she wanted to see true equality in poker, and creating separate events was a step in the wrong direction. Her argument was measured and rooted in a long-term vision for the game, but Daniel wasn't interested in debating policy. He wanted to go for the jugular. He fired back once again, this time mocking Annie's claim of being the best female player, while simultaneously arguing against gender divisions. He accused her of enjoying the perks of the title when it suited her, and abandoning it when it didn't. What could have been a thoughtful debate about inclusivity turned into another round of personal attacks. The feud had evolved, but the bitterness hadn't faded. If anything, it was getting worse. Despite the heated debates and personal attacks, nothing prepared the poker community for what would happen next. In 2010, Daniel Negreanu was interviewed by a European poker publication. During the interview, he dropped a bombshell. Referring to Annie Duke, he used one of the most offensive acronyms in the English language, the C word, and to make matters worse, he included a well-known F-bomb to lead into it. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. The context made it clear Daniel was speaking with venom. The backlash was immediate. Even those who disliked Annie found the language too extreme. Blogs lit up, poker forums exploded, and Daniel found himself under intense scrutiny. Many believed that Daniel had finally crossed the line, not just professionally, but ethically. Annie Duke took the opportunity to go on the offensive. In a blog post titled "An Open Letter to Poker Stars," she criticized both Daniel and the platform that sponsored him. She questioned how poker stars could allow such behavior from their most visible ambassador. She quoted a response from a PokerStars support rep who claimed Daniel had the freedom to express himself as an individual. Annie wasn't satisfied. She demanded accountability, not just for Daniel's words, but for those backing him. Daniel, under pressure, claimed the comment was made off the record and shouldn't have been published, but the damage was already done. Whether or not it was meant for public consumption, the intent behind it was crystal clear. For many, this moment solidified what they had already suspected. This feud was no longer about poker. It was about personal destruction, about one player trying to erase the other from the game's legacy. And in the eyes of many, Daniel had taken it too far. Just when it seemed the feud had reached its peak, 2 more controversies reignited the fire. Both involved Annie Duke's business ventures, and both would end in disaster. First came her deep involvement with UltimateBet, one of the biggest online poker sites of the 2000s. At first, it was a career win. She was a spokesperson, a sponsored pro, and a key member of the team. But when the site was caught up in a massive cheating scandal involving super user accounts, everything came crashing down. Players had been unknowingly competing against accounts that could see their hole cards in real time. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were stolen. And while Annie wasn't directly accused of operating the super user accounts, her public affiliation with UltimateBet made her a lightning rod for criticism. Daniel, never one to miss a chance to strike, used the scandal as more proof of her questionable judgment and moral compass. Then came the Epic Poker League. Annie was announced as its commissioner and face of the brand. It promised to revolutionize tournament poker, offering televised events, player-friendly structures, and $1 million free roll for the best performers. But Daniel wasn't buying the hype. In a blog post titled "Why I Don't Play the EPL," he shredded the league's financial model, questioned its sustainability, and accused Annie of pushing an ego-driven vanity project. He was right. The Epic Poker League collapsed within a year, after just 3 events. The promised free roll never happened. The company filed for bankruptcy with over $5 million in debt. Annie's reputation took another massive hit. Daniel mocked the failure, calling it predictable. To him, this wasn't just about bad business. It was a continuation of the pattern he had been warning people about for over a decade. And now, it seemed, the poker world was finally starting to listen. After years of venom, blog posts, interviews, and leaked emails, the fire between Daniel Negreanu and Annie Duke finally seemed to cool. Not because anything was resolved, but because the poker spotlight shifted elsewhere. In 2010, they were seated next to each other during the World Series Tournament of Champions. With cameras rolling and fans watching closely, everyone expected fireworks. Instead, nothing happened. They barely exchanged words, no confrontations, no cold stares, not even passive-aggressive jabs. For the first time in years, it looked like they had both simply decided to ignore each other. Whether it was mutual exhaustion, professional advice, or a quiet truce brokered by someone behind the scenes, the tension didn't explode. It simply simmered. Daniel would later tone down his public attacks, though he never walked them back. Annie faded from the poker spotlight after the collapse of the Epic Poker League and her departure from UltimateBet. By the mid-2010s, she had pivoted to a career in corporate speaking and decision-making consultancy. Her presence at major poker events disappeared almost entirely. There was never an apology, no handshake, no moment of mutual respect, just silence. And in that silence, the poker world filled in the blanks. Fans took sides, forums debated the fallout. Some admired Daniel's brutal honesty, others believed he took things too far. But one thing everyone agrees on: this feud was unlike anything poker had seen before. It showed that beneath the chips and sunglasses, poker players are human, flawed, emotional, sometimes vindictive. It reminded everyone that reputations are fragile and that a public platform can be both a weapon and a curse. Daniel and Annie will forever be linked, not because of a legendary hand or a shared victory, but because of a decade-long war of words that never truly ended. Annie may have left the game, but the fallout of her rivalry with Daniel still echoes. And for those who watched it unfold in real time, it wasn't just about 2 poker personalities clashing. It was about pride, perception, and the cost of going all in on hate. And that's the real story behind why Daniel Negreanu truly hates Annie Duke. But Daniel wasn't the only poker champion to get caught in controversy. Next, we look at Jamie Gold, how one of the most talked about World Series winners went from the top of the poker world to a dramatic fall from grace. Click through and see how fast the game can turn on its champions.